And I think we're live. Yes, we are live. And I have got a very, very special guest today, Craig Smith. How are you, sir?
Shaun, how are you, mate?
I'm very good. Before we get started, I just want you to know that my lotto dream is if I won millions and millions and millions of dollars is to have a place up in Queenstown. And I'm there with a recording studio out the back, and I am working on my third film. And then during the day, I go down on the Shotover River on a jet boat. And so the purpose of this call is not to actually interview you. It's really just for me to say that I'm incredibly jealous of you.
Well, let me tell you, bro. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
Before I became a #1 best-selling author, and before all the Janice Clark stuff kicked off, and the Wonky Donkey, I had enough money to put a deposit down on a house in Queenstown, and I did.
So, good man. Good on you.
And that was from basically 10 years of saving and being quite frugal. And it's basically put away enough to have a deposit for the house. I had 200,000 saved after 10 years, and and came to Queenstown because this is where I grew up, as you may know. And then I just decided, what am I doing? I want to go back home. So, and I knew to do that, I had to save some money. So I just got frugal and started putting it away. And
And
you don't have to win lotto is my point.
yeah, I'm hearing you. And so how's Queenstown going at the moment with COVID and everything? Is it still? It seems like every person I speak to go, "Oh, we're going to Queenstown for the weekend."
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously we've had a lot of people who can't leave the country, who would normally leave the country, decide to come down this way, and that was over the, say, Labour weekend, etc. And that was great because obviously this is a tourist town, and a good massive percentage of the income is generated through tourism. So it was good to have those locals come down. But no, it's really quiet now. So it's super quiet. And there's a lot of people hurting down here, for sure.
Okay, for those of you who are joining us, I'm talking to Craig Smith, and he is probably best known, I think, for creating Wonky Donkey, and we'll get to that shortly. But actually, what I'm interested in to begin with is can you take me back to when you first started writing and when you thought to yourself, "Gee, I'd really like to do this for a living."
Well, it was through music, first of all.
Right.
I wanted to be a professional musician, which I managed to do. And I decided I was going to give myself a full year of being a professional musician, and then at the end of that year, like put in 100% effort. And at the end of the year, if I wasn't in a better space than when I started, then perhaps it was just as a hobby. And then progressed to being a professional musician, stuck inside with some nieces and nephews on a rainy day and starting to play them silly little songs that I'd written for a laugh, and then play it again, you know. And then obviously Wonky Donkey is one of those. And I entered that into the inaugural Children's Music Awards way back in 2008, which it won in conjunction with Claudia Gunn's Lullaby. So it was like a dual winners. And once it won, that started to make me think, oh, maybe I've really got something here. And funnily enough, I kind of thought that beforehand with all the kids getting into it. And I'd sent a few letters off to publishers, and that unfortunately all said no. But then after it won New Zealand Children's Music Song of the Year, I was able to resubmit it to Scholastic, my publisher. And from there we were able to print the book with the lovely work of Katz Cowley, and rest is history, really.
So I would imagine, like a lot of writers, some ideas just jump into your head, and all of a sudden you're just writing it down. You're creating the music, and it just pours out of you. And then there would be on other occasions where you've got an idea, and you sort of know where you're wanting to head, but you're just chiseling away and just
most of them. Yeah, the second one is most of them.
Really?
But the first one does happen, and when it happens, and you just sit down and it flows. Wonky Donkey was like that.
Was Wonky Donkey just
was like the first one? Yeah.
Wow.
So I'd heard a joke, went home, sat down, picked up the guitar. He was a honky tonky, winky wonky donkey. So I had to write it in the honky tonky sort of country style. So I found that little riff, which is a pretty basic country riff, and I sat down and wrote it in the afternoon. My thesaurus and my rhyming dictionary.
And so, how long did it actually take you to write from start to finish, roughly?
Oh, just a few hours. Yeah. So that does happen, as I said, but most of them are sit down and you've got a good idea and you sort of struggle and you finally piece it all together. That's what most of them are like.
And
sometimes over weeks and sometimes over months.
When you were writing that, the Wonky Donkey, and you're sort of halfway through, and you're probably and it's the story's coming along, and you're getting into it. At that point, like sort of halfway through, were you thinking to yourself, "This is something quite special here"? Did you have were you getting butterflies? Not quite special.
I wouldn't say quite special. I'd say this is fun. This is going to make people giggle. This is going to make people giggle. And that was the whole idea. The whole plan was it's going to make not just kids, but parents giggle as well. That was the plan.
Well,
bit of a tongue twister, bit of a giggle.
You certainly achieved that. Okay, so maybe can we delve into a little bit more about the story of the Wonky Donkey? Not the story, but the story of how it then unfolded and its popularity, just to bring it into perspective here for people.
So you mean the writing of the story, or the story of how once it was
sold worldwide, #1 author? Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. So when it was first released, the Wonky Donkey book went straight to #1. And it was knocked off the #1 spot until my next book, which was Will Be the Bumblebee, knocked it off the #1 spot. So it was #1 for an entire year in New Zealand in the children's picture book category. And then Wonky Donkey Will Be the Bumblebee came out, and then that did well. But Wonky Donkey's always been in the top 3 or top 5 or top 10, for quite some time. It has dropped off from time to time, but mostly it's been in that top 10. And then it was #1 in Australia as well. So in the first 9 years of its life, or maybe 8 years of its life, it had sold around 1 million copies, which is a really good selling children's picture book from New Zealand, especially with New Zealand only having 4 million, or now 5 million people in it. So international sales included in that. But then what happened is, of course, the story. Janice Clark, the Scottish granny, got a hold of it.
Yes.
She read it to her grandson Archer. She had more fun than Archer, clearly. And that video of her reading that book to her grandson went viral. And it's been seen around 200, maybe 300 million times now, that video, and continues to make people laugh. So that was what launched it overseas. It had been printed overseas in the UK and in the US, but no promotion like it had with that 200, 300 million people watching Janice's video. So it just absolutely went stratospheric very, very quickly. And actually, for a period there of about 3 weeks, it was the #1 selling book across all genres in the world. So,
you must have.
It wasn't just the #1 selling picture book; it was the #1 selling book in the world. So it's pretty cool for 3 weeks. And of course, last year, 2019, Wonky Donkey was the #1 selling book by a New Zealand author in New Zealand. So that was pretty cool as well.
It was interesting because at the start of our chat, you talked about saving for this house that you own in Queenstown, and I could see just by the look on your face, well, this is my perception anyway, that you're quite proud that you did that, and you obviously have a very high work ethic. Is that right? Would that be a fair way of describing you? Like, how often do you write? Do you write all the time, every day? Do you feel the need to do that, or do you just?
No, the writing, I sort of need to be in a good space for that to happen.
Yes.
And so, I sort of give myself the time to allow that to happen. And sometimes that can happen. So I've been driving along the road and just pulled over the side of the road and started writing. Now, sometimes you can't do that because, you've got responsibilities. You've got your child to pick up from school or whatever. My daughter's 5. But at least I can pull over for a few minutes and write at least the idea down. And then as soon as I can, I sit down and start writing. So sometimes it springs upon myself like that. Other times I'll give myself like 5 days of complete isolation where I can just sit down and get into those ideas. And generally what I find is in those spaces I can sit down and churn something out. But sometimes that takes a little bit of discipline. Sometimes you don't feel like doing that. But where I go, I've got a little log cabin down south as well now. That's been in the family for quite some time, and I brought that off my brother about 5 years ago, and I use that to its advantage as well, to my advantage. I head down there and give myself 5 days, and if it's just not taking me, if I just feel like I'm not in the mode, I'll get out and do some labor on the land. I've got 4 acres down there. I need to get rid of some broom and some gorse or something like that. So I'll get out there and struggle a little bit, make a cup of tea, come in, maybe have a swim in the little in the river that we've got there, and then I can just sit down, clear my head, and so I do tend to give myself a bit of space there as well.
So where you're at in your career at the moment, when you're sitting down and working on something, are you like a sort of half musician, half businessman, where you're going, I know that if I write this kind of formula, it's got a high chance of generating a hell of a lot of sales? Or are you very much like, actually, I'm going to write this because I like it, I think my audience will like it, and if sales come from it, so be it? How do you approach that?
The second balance? More the second
one again.
Yeah, because what happens is I've got plenty of things that I've written that I've got a huge advantage over a lot of other writers, and that is I actually play guitar and sing, so I can actually go out and perform and do a show for the kids. And if something's new that's I've written, I want to trial out, then I can trial it out. And I can see by the kids, it's sort of my market research, and I can see by the kids' responses, by the teachers' responses, if I'm doing it at a school, or librarians' responses, or parents' responses, that it's working or it's not working. And if it's working, then I know I can then shift it on. But there's plenty of stuff that I've written that just doesn't work. So it's not like, so it's one of the reasons why most of my books do really, really well. Like out of the 10 books that I've written, every single one bar one has been to number one. And so, and a lot of people are like, how do you do that? Well, the thing is I've written way more than just 10, and 30 of them are good as songs, and I put them on my albums. And they might be fun as a song, or they might have a small message, but they're not going to go straight to number one, because and that's not to say that that's an important thing. It's not. It's just, if you want to make a living out of what you do, it's good to have books that can go to number one.
Yeah.
So I tend to publish those ones that are really that have a popular response. And I've got some stuff out there that doesn't have a popular response, but I've still had people come up to me and go, that's my favorite. That song is my favorite. Why don't you do that one as a book? And it's possible that it will do okay as a book, but then it's like, well, if it only sells 3,000 copies, that's not how to make a living from being a children's author. I mean, you can, and it's great to get those books out there, because depending on the situation, and maybe I'll do that in the future. Maybe I'll re-release some of those ones that I think should be books but
Do
maybe
you see yourself as a musician first and foremost before anything else?
Yeah.
Yeah. I can tell.
I mean, it depends. Like I would say, because you know how they say singer-songwriter, sort of like if you listen to Cat Stevens, or if you listen to James Taylor, or if you listen to Harry Chapin, all these people you'd say they're musicians, but they're storytellers. You know,
Yes.
so I would class
You're
myself
right.
as a storyteller with a guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the way that
musician
you just
over
talk about
the
the
writer.
process, the way that you talk about the process, you know, it's just as if you know, I could be just as easily talking to a Neil Finn. It's a similar
Sure.
process, or a
Yeah.
comedian that goes
Mhm.
out and goes and does some smaller gigs, you know, to begin with, to get a feel from you. It's the same thing, surely.
Sure, it is. And so this is where I say I have an advantage over a writer, not other musicians, because all musicians or all comedians do exactly that. Most writers try and write something and then they get it into book form and then it gets received. And the only filter they really have is the editorial process, where they might have a few friends and family as well as the publisher reading it. And it takes a very amazing editor and publisher to be able to go, this is going to work, but that's not, and get it right. Because if they had known, like I'll give you an example, not taking anything away from my publisher Scholastic, but if they knew that Wonky Donkey was going to sell 4 million copies around the world, well, why was the initial print run 3,000? So they knew
we underdid it.
Yeah, so they knew it was a good book. That's why they wanted to do it. But nobody, not me included, nobody knew it was going to go that far.
So have you recorded any do you write songs for a different audience, an older audience? Have you ever done have you released music in the past?
I have. I've got 2 albums on Spotify under Craig Smith.
Great.
One's called 45 South, which is the one I'm most proud of. One is called Don't Shake My Tree, which is my first attempt at going into a studio, and I did 12 songs over about 2 weeks with a whole bunch of people. And that was a huge effort, and I would never do that again. What I do now is I just do 1 or 2 songs in the studio, get them done, do another 2 songs in the studio. When I feel like going back in the studio again in a few months, do another couple of songs, 1 or 2 or maybe 3 here and there. And then once you've got a collection, then you can put them on an album. So that's what I do now. But in the past, you've got the truck going by here. But in the past, the first album I did, Don't Shake My Tree, I did 12 songs over 2 weeks, and you can tell because there are points where I just went, I can't hear anything anymore, and and I go back and listen to some of those tunes now, and I go, oh, I changed that. I definitely changed that. And why didn't I notice that? Why didn't I notice that? And when you're doing 12 songs and you're on a sort of a budget and you're on a schedule, then it's
So did you have someone else
lazy.
come in as an act as the producer, or did you produce?
No, I did that
yourself?
one through Voodoo Records in Christchurch. I had help from people like Graham Wardrop, who's an amazing guitarist. I had help from other musicians throughout the area, just little bit pieces here and there, bass playing, Then 45 South was really, really good. I had a few made in Christchurch. I worked with the Christchurch Symphony Orchestra on a couple of tracks. I got very lucky because when I was in Christchurch, I was playing, and Stevie Wonder's band heard me playing. They made a comment that if they enjoyed the afternoon, they were having lunch and listening to me play. Stevie Wonder just played a few nights before on the Thursday night. This was on the Sunday. They were hanging around New Zealand, just being tourists. Apparently, they had to be in Morocco a week after that, but that was it. They were hanging around, and one of them said, if you ever get to LA, give us a bell. And a guy called Kevin Allison, who was he worked with the crew as well, and he sort of semi-immigrated to New Zealand also. So through that connection with Kevin's help and meeting people, from the band, we flew to LA, and I recorded 4 songs with them.
Wow.
4.5. We did nearly 5 songs. I would say, And you know, I mean, I've got Nate Watts playing bass on my track. Now he's the guy who played bass for Songs of the Key of Life, you know, Stevie's album, and he also was lent by Stevie to Michael Jackson to play on the Thriller album. So he's a very accomplished bass player, and to have him playing, and then people like Errol Cooney, the lead guitarist, and Roman Johnston and Chris Johnston on drums, Roman Johnston on keyboards. I'm pretty proud of that album, mate. It sounds amazing, and I'm happy with the songs too. But that came out in 2010, and that adults album, and my children's book came out in at the end of 2009. So November 2009, my book came out, and then it just went crazy. So the adult stuff sort of went, and the kids stuff just went. So, and I'd be silly not to follow that impetus, as it were. So I just switched over to doing children's stuff pretty much full time, although I still do adult stuff as well.
I've got a good friend, Justin Brown, who's a great author, churns out a whole lot of books. And what's he done? So in the past, he's done books for the adult audience, and now he's writing books for teenagers. And so he actually met with this author, well-known author, his name escapes me now, international success like you. And he said to him, Justin, you need to change your surname for the kids stuff.
Right.
I can't remember the name. It's a really cool name that he's got. So he goes under 2 different names. Have you ever thought, you know, like, do you think that you want to do more recordings for, you know, the adult audience, and would you change your name, or do you just think, you know?
I'm not sure if I'd change my name. It's pretty boring, old Craig Smith. In fact, when people Google me or something like that, it's like there's a hockey player, there's a basketball player, there's a rugby league player. You know, there's a couple of other musicians called Craig Smith. It's pretty bland name. And you're right, maybe I should change my name. But I've sort of adopted the Wonky Donkey Man. That's kind of my children's name now, and most people know, oh look, it's the Wonky Donkey Man, or hey, there's the Wonky Donkey Man, or hey, Wonky Donkey Man, or something like that. But it's hardly ever Hey Craig Smith if it's a fan.
Yeah,
so
right.
That's sort of my pseudonym now anyway. Sort of organically happened.
Any big projects on the go at the moment? Stuff that you're working on? Any?
Yeah, well, we've got this weekend, in fact, the Granny Donkey, which is a brand new book. I'm terrible at promotion, really. I mean, I should have one here to show you, but it's so the Granny Donkey is coming out this weekend, and it's Dinky's. Dinky came out last year, Dinky Donkey.
Yeah.
And so it's Dinky's grandmother. And there's a bit of a connection with what's been going on in the world in the last wee while, which is basically, you know, don't forget to visit your grandparents, and go and give them a big cuddle, and go and see them as much as you can, or your parents, depending on how old they are, stuff like that. So in this book, she becomes grumpy and cranky because she hasn't seen her family for a while, and then her granddaughter Dinky turns up, and her son Wonky turns up, and we drop the cranky part, and we swap in the granny, so she becomes the Granny Donkey, and among other adjectives.
Hey, I'm so grateful for your time today. I knew that I was going to enjoy this, and I really have. So thank you so much for your time, Craig. And you know, you should know this. I mean, as Kiwis, we love our rugby, and we celebrate our All Blacks and all those other things. But you know, New Zealand is incredibly proud of you and what you've achieved with us. You're a really, really awesome guy, and you've just done such a great job. So I wish you all the best for the future, and look forward to catching up with you soon.
All right, Shaun. Thanks, bro. I really appreciate it. You take care.
Thanks, man. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.